Kanika. Welcome back to my corner. I'm going to talk about breastfeeding today because that is one of the most important things, as we bring a new baby into the world, and it's that thing that starts the bond between a mother and child. So absolutely painful initially, because this is a baby who's pulling on a new part of our body, on a very sensitive part of our body. So it can be quite difficult initially, but I hope that with these tips, it becomes much easier. So tip number 1, when we have gone through prolonged labor or have had difficulty bringing this baby out into the world, let's not expect our milk to come out immediately. Give it time. If at all milk doesn't come out, we'll get that colostrum, which is the initial yellowish bit. Excellent. Give your baby colostrum, formula milk, give your body to settle down, to start healing, and then it'll naturally produce milk. Don't force yourself to produce milk as soon as you deliver your baby. Tip number 2 is all about dealing with breast engorgement. Now this is something that happens very often initially, especially when our milk production is increasing and the new baby's needs aren't as much. So what happens is our breasts become very heavy, they don't jingle about as much, and they sometimes leak when we're feeding from one side. So what you need to do is keep a warm compress on. If you feel any clots in your breast or you feel it harden quite a bit, put in a warm compress, have a warm water bath, and as the milk flows out naturally, your breast will start feeling softer and definitely less painful. So one of the tips that I learned is that when your breast is engorged on one side, feed the baby specifically on the heavy side, and if not, what you just need to do is feed your baby on one side, and while you're doing it, just naturally press your hand on the other side, and that actually pulls the flow back and you don't get wet. So that's the best part of it. So tip number 3 is how to hold your newborn's face while they are feeding from you. Now typically what they will do is they will smush their face into your breast because they don't know how to do it any other way. And so that makes it difficult for them to breathe. So all that we have to do as mothers is gently push down on our breast where their nose is, so that it gives them that little bit of space to breathe, and then continue with the feed. As they grow older, say month 1, month 2, they figure out how to do it by themselves. So it's just those initial few weeks that we need to do this little practice. Newborns need some reminding to feed. Right? Suckling is a lot of work, so sometimes they get tired in the middle and they just doze off. So if after 10 seconds they haven't started feeding again, just rub their jawline or tickle their ear a little bit, and they will wake up and start feeding. So that is tip number 4. Tip number 5 is about using coconut oil as a nipple cream. Now it's really painful in those first few weeks, even up to 2 months, and that was the case for me, that our nipples will tend to crack and break because of this new sensation of breastfeeding. There are lots of nipple creams out there in the market, but I found that coconut oil was the most effective and the safest for the baby. In case we forget to wipe it off just before the feed, it's alright for the baby to have had a little bit of coconut oil. Try and get organic cold pressed ones. I also found that the best time to put it was just after a feed, so there is the most amount of time for that oil to soak into the skin and help heal it. When we start breastfeeding a child for the first time, feed them a little bit from both sides. I know that a lot of people out there, lactation specialists, will tell us that it's very important that a baby gets 4 and half milk, which is enough milk from one side. But as a new mother, it was really painful to have engorgement on both sides, especially when the baby would feed only once in 2 or 3 hours. So my tip is that you feed a little from both sides, the baby gets enough nutrition, and once the feeding process has settled and there's not as much engorgement, then let the baby feed completely from one side. So the next tip is not to eat your food in a hurry. Really important that as new mothers we have a good, well-balanced, nutritious meal. And very typically our baby will cry just at that point for his or her meal. So 2 things that you do. Either you have a little bit while your support partner, either your parent or your partner, will help distract the baby, or you leave your meal where it is, finish feeding the baby, then come back and relaxed and finish eating your meal. Don't eat in a hurry, it's just going to cause you indigestion and it doesn't give you the satisfaction that you've eaten well, right? So that's the next tip. Drinking lots of fluids is my next tip. About 4.5 to 5 liters a day. You can have as many juices as you want. You can have different kinds of milks. You can have cow milk, almond milk, soy milk. You can have all of those. Have a lot of soup, have rasam. Drink lots of water. That's the mainstay of it. And that is the best way of producing milk. So what happens with our body, especially when we're breastfeeding for the first time, is that it feels dried up because the baby is sucking so much out of us. So what I would do is keep this bottle with a straw next to me on the table while I'm feeding, and through a 10-15 minute feed I'd keep taking sips of water so I didn't feel dried up or parched, and that helped a lot. Try and drink a cup of something either before or after a feed. That quickly replenishes our supply. The next tip is to give the baby feeds as often as they ask for. Sometimes it may be once in 45 minutes, sometimes it's once in 4 hours. That's all right. What I found was that if I gave her a feed as soon as she asked for it, she was that much more comfortable. Even if she'd had feeds in quick succession and therefore threw up because there was too much in her stomach, she was still much better off than, me denying her that feed and saying, no, you've had a feed too soon. So just give them a feed when they ask for. And actually throwing up is quite a good sign. We have a saying, kakkidre dakkidro, which means that if the baby has had milk and thrown it up, they are actually doing well. They, in the olden days when infant mortality rates were high, this was something that would be said to a healthy baby. So yeah, throwing up is a good sign. So just give them a feed as often as they ask for, and don't worry about it. So while it is important to give them feeds as often as they ask for, very important to look at the duration of a feed. So average about 10 to 15 minutes, max of 30 minutes. And if you find that your baby is constantly overeating and throwing up, then try and reduce the feed to 10 minutes. And then even if they're saying every 45 minutes they want a feed, give it to them every 10 minutes. Once they get used to not throwing up, extend it to 12-13 minutes. And in that way, you help your baby to regulate their system. So very important to just take that cue. And sometimes, delatching them feels a little cruel, especially when they want a little more milk. But if in the long run, it will help them regulate themselves faster, it's a good thing for us to do. Pumping is a very favored method for some women and it works for a lot. It didn't work for me. What I found was that pumping would create more milk demand and therefore it was really painful. So don't always go with the idea that pumping works. Check it out for yourself, and that is a very important tip. Now, to me, this next tip is really something that is crucial in the bonding process. We spend so much of time feeding the baby, especially in the first 2 months, that it feels, very easy for us to pull out our phone and check social media. Let's not do that. Spend the time singing or talking to your baby, even if they're not responding to you. And spend that crucial bit of time just building that additional bond with them. It's beautiful to sing to your sleeping baby. It's really nice and it just feels so soothing to you. This tip is all about clothing. Now, I highly recommend using nursing bras, the one with the clip off, so it's easy to use as and when you need, and especially when it's sleep time. Also use bra inserts. Now, what bra inserts do is they help leakage from coming out and staining all of our clothes. And the sort of bra insert that I prefer is just a single layer of cloth where 1/4 of it has a rubber sheet material. We fold, put it into the bra. Very easy to dry, and I prefer it a lot more than what we find in the market, which is multiple layers stuck together, because the multiple layers hold in milk and it starts to smell a lot faster. Wear loose cotton tops. Button tops didn't quite work for me, so what worked was just something that was loose and we could pull up easily and feed the baby with. And I love patterned dark colored tops. It did not show any of the staining that happened initially. My next tip is to take the help of your husband or parents to burp the child, especially in the night. It's draining to be taking care of your child day and night. So take the support of those around you. And for those couples who want to make it equal duty, please remember that both of you staying up in the night to take care of feeding and burping doesn't make sense at all. One of you rest while the other one takes care of one of those activities. And while this may not be considered a tip, I think it's important that we say it's okay to be frustrated and annoyed during the breastfeeding process. There are times when we will find a lot of joy in it, but please do remember there's no problem if at that moment we're feeling like, I don't want this, or oh God, here she is back again for a feed. It's all right to feel that way. So I hope these tips help you settle down into the breastfeeding process. Most importantly, just remember, be patient as you and your baby get used to this new thing.